Today we are in our second week of what do we do with evil. Last week we talked about evil that begins inside of us, and sometimes evil in this world is a projection of really what's happening internally with us, and we just kind of put it out onto other people. And so this week we're going to be talking about this need to blame. Right? This need to, when things are happening in the world that are bad or that are evil, we need to blame it on someone. We need to find something to blame and how, and we're going to learn the way that Jesus responded to that. But today we get to start with some really interesting texts that I love. So I hope I don't get too excited about this, but this is amazing, fascinating stuff about our own tradition and history as people in the Judeo-Christian family. So our text today is going to come from the Old Testament, Leviticus. How many sermons you hear on Leviticus? Yeah, this is great stuff. And then we'll also be looking at John 8, 1 through 11, and how it is that these two texts actually go together. So here is Leviticus 16, verses 20 through 22. When Aaron had finished reconciling the inner holy area, the rest of the meeting tent, and the altar, he will bring forward the live goat. Aaron will press both his hands on its head and confess over it all the Israelites' offenses and all of their rebellious sins, as well as all other sins, putting all these things on the goat's head. Then he will send it away into the wilderness with someone designated for the job. The goat will carry on itself all of their offenses to a desolate region. Then the goat will be released into the wild. And now hear that alongside of the Gospel of John, chapter 8. And Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning, he returned to the temple. All the people gathered around him, and he sat down and taught them. The legal experts and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery. Placing her in the center of the group, they said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of committing adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone a woman like this. What do you say?" They said this to test him, because they wanted a reason to bring an accusation against him. Jesus bent down and wrote on the ground with his finger. They continued to question him, so he stood up and replied, "Whoever hasn't sinned should throw the first stone." Bending down again, he wrote on the ground. Those who heard him went away one by one, beginning with the elders. Finally, only Jesus and the woman were left in the middle of the crowd. Jesus stood up and said to her, Woman, where are they? Is there no one to condemn you?" She said, "No one, sir." Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on, don't sin anymore." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So, what do we do with evil? So I wanted to begin today, and some of you already got a hint of this older child situation, but we have a running joke in my family with my oldest child, Sophia, who is in college at the University of Georgia. And the joke is this. Several years ago, my mom and my girls and I went to London. And we were sightseeing in London, and it was summertime. And, you know, these big cities, when you travel, if you do it in the summertime, you're shoulder to shoulder with half the world wanting to see the exact same things that you want to see. And we were walking, and we were right in front of, you know, Big Ben and Parliament, right? We were on Westminster Bridge, and we were walking that way. And we were on a sidewalk that had it had a rise about like that out of cement, went straight down into the road, and then the sidewalk was up here. And so all of us were doing this number, trying to get across Westminster Bridge. And I was in the front, with one of my kids and my mom, and my oldest daughter, Sophia, and her best friend were bringing up the rear, right? And I thought, well, my mom at the time, it was before she'd had a knee surgery, and she wasn't quite so steady, but they were behind me, and it was my understanding that they were watching their grandmother. So we're walking, and I hear this loud gasp. And I turn around, and my mom is on the ground. And she didn't fall off the bridge, but she almost fell off the bridge. And there are people surrounding her, and, because they were like this. And this one woman is helping her up. And I ran back to help my mom. And my oldest daughter is standing right there with her best friend. And I'm like, Sophia, what are you doing? You were supposed to be watching your grandmother, and you let her fall. And she was like, Mom, I was behind her. What did you want me to do? And I was like, well, I don't know. And then a little later on, I had to apologize, right? Because I was so upset. I was so upset that in that awful crowded bridge, my mom fell and could have gotten hurt. She was fine, but she could have gotten hurt, and I wasn't there to help her or protect her or whatever. And so the first thing I did was blame my daughter, the oldest one. And so now, anytime that anyone in my family gets blamed for something, it's always Sophia. Because you know what? She wasn't watching her grandmother, and she's never watching, and it's just always her fault. And she's like, it's tough being the oldest. Yeah, it is. It is, right? Right? You get blamed for stuff even when it's not your fault. But I thankfully realized fairly quickly that it was just too crowded. It was just too crowded, too much going on. It was not her fault. Today, I want us to talk about this scripture and how it is and how easy it is for us to blame people, to blame someone else, even for things that probably not even their fault, right? Now, sometimes it is, but I want us to talk about this idea. I told you I really love this Leviticus text. I love this Leviticus text because this is where we get the Day of Atonement from for our Jewish brothers and sisters. They celebrate this every year, a Day of Atonement, where the community repents of their sin and that they will beat their chest. I mean, not hard, modern Western Jews aren't hitting themselves very hard. They're just doing this. But it was a day where they would, for the whole year, they've done all these things. They've been separated from God, and this is their day to be able to release some of that, right? To release some of that energy and regret and pain and suffering that they've caused in the year before. So this Day of Atonement comes from Leviticus, when Aaron they were told to have 2 goats, right? And on one of the goats, he would place his hands upon that goat and symbolically be able to place all of the sins of the community onto. They needed somewhere for that to go, right? We need somewhere for our pain. We need somewhere for our fear, our anxiety, our regret. They needed it to go somewhere. And so what they would do, they would take that goat, they would ritually place the sins of themselves, the community, on that goat. Someone would lead that goat out to the wilderness and let it go. I think it's kind of cool. I mean, to be able to, it's like a vent, or like the vent on your teapot, right? Like when it gets so hot in there, the steam blows. It has to vent. The scapegoat was a vent for the community. And so this idea was really something that we can relate to now. We have the same issues now. But here's the thing when you begin to think about this text, especially as kind of modern people, we think to ourselves, well, that goat didn't do anything. I mean, They just, poor goat. He just was the chosen goat to take on the sins of everybody else, and then they just sent him out on his own, and he probably starved to death, right? This wasn't, no, okay, y'all are telling me, yeah, goats eat everything, don't they? Yeah, all right. All right, so it breaks down, doesn't it? I love it when y'all are interactive and you're sitting there going, nope, that goat did not starve. Yeah. But we are not so involved that we don't see that this didn't work, right? Trying to place the sins, trying to place the hurts and the pains and the fears all onto something external like that. They had to do it again the next year, and the next year, and the next year. Because putting it all onto something like that just doesn't work. We want evil to be something tangible. We want evil to have a face. We want those people to be the problem. We want, if we could just get rid of them, it would be better, right? If we could just finally hold them accountable, things would be perfect. We want evil to have a face, and preferably not our face, right? Somebody else's. Scapegoating. Scapegoating is what we're talking about today, and it's still one of our favorite ways to deal with our pain, our frustration, and our anxiety. And there was a anthropologist and theologian, Rene Girard, back in the 20th century, and he talks about this and communities and how this scapegoating mechanism happens in communities. And he says, we often manage conflict by identifying a person or a group of people as the source of all of our problems. And then the community becomes unified around agreement on that it's them. And once everyone agrees that they are the problem, then we can all feel better and we can feel righteous. And we've got a vent. They become our vent because we've all agreed that they're going to be our vent. We divide the world up into us and them, good and bad, righteous, wicked. And once we've established who the bad people are, guess what? We don't have to examine ourselves very closely anymore because we already know who the bad people are, who the problems are. We see this every day. We see it in our families, right? There's always somebody in the family that takes the heat for things, right? We don't sacrifice goats, but we do blame people. We blame political enemies nowadays. We blame social media pylons, cancel culture, outrage cycles, conspiracy theories, those people, that Gen Z. What are we going to do with them, right? We find those Christians, those liberal Christians, those conservative Christians. We still need a vent and a scapegoat. And even though we ain't killing goats anymore or sending them out, the human impulse to do this has not changed. So here's where we meet the gospel. Here's where we meet what happens in the Gospel of John, chapter 8. There is a woman, and she's caught in adultery. There's something very interesting about this text, right? She doesn't arrive. She doesn't go to Jesus. Jesus goes, well, they bring Jesus to her, right? They bring Jesus to her. They bring her to Jesus. There we go. Sometimes, yeah, this is when I need that. Preach it. Come on, preacher. Get it out. All right. She is in this situation. She's already carrying everyone else's shame, and she's carrying their desire for punishment. She's a vent. We're going to kill people who who commit adultery. Well, dear Lord, if we did that today, can you even imagine? The population of the world would not be 8 billion. We'd be about half that. So we see what Jesus does. And so here they come to him and they say, now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such a woman. What do you say, Jesus? And we know now that this story isn't really about the woman, right? It's a trap. And they're asking Jesus, whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? Are you with us? Or are you against her? Are you going to join the crowd? What are you going to do, Jesus? And Jesus refuses this either or. He refuses black and white, right? And he bends down and he writes something in the sand. Nobody knows what he wrote. I've never read anything that said, he drew a picture or wrote a dirty word. I don't know. But he bends down, he writes something in the sand. And part of the beauty of the story is we have no idea. But it's really what Jesus refuses to do that stands out even more. What he refuses to do, and he refuses to participate in the spectacle of what's happening with this woman. He refuses to be a part of it, and he says, let anyone among you who is without sin cast the first stone, throw a stone. And then we get this drama that slowly, one by one, they all start to leave. And it's interesting, Jesus doesn't say that she didn't sin. He's not saying that adultery is not a sin, but he's saying, wait a minute, though. Wait a minute. You cannot treat human beings that way. Instead, he changes the question, who is guilty, to who among you is innocent? Who among you? And that's a completely different question. And Jesus, he's not denying evil. But the common, and I hear this so often among Christians as they talk about those other Christians, Jesus isn't saying that everybody's okay and it doesn't matter what you do. He's not saying that. But that's really not what this story is about anyway, right? This story is that he takes this very seriously. And what Jesus refuses is that we heal evil by creating new victims. You cannot heal evil by creating new victims. You see, the crowd believes if you can just identify the evil person, punish the evil person, order will be restored, right? We want order. We want peace at any cost. And Jesus interrupts that, and Jesus says this, look honestly at yourself, refuse to be violent, and create a space for those people, that person, to be transformed. It's very, very different. Very, very different. And it's so much harder, right? So much. It would be, if it was just black and white and Jesus had agreed with them and law had been kept, it would have been fine. But he says, refuse the violence and make space for this woman's heart to be changed. And he tells her, go on your way and sin no more. So because scapegoating gives us something very satisfying, someone to hate, some group to hate, Jesus speaks in direct opposition when he says, I'm going to ask you to do something much harder. I'm going to ask you to examine yourself first. So he doesn't condemn her, and he does send her on her way. Because with Jesus, what we see throughout his teachings is that grace comes before transformation. We want people to change. We want the world to change. We want those people to change. Grace comes first. That's at least what Jesus did. That's at least what he taught. And he doesn't say, change first and then I'll I'll stop condemning you. He says, you are not condemned. Now just go live differently. So with evil, we don't pretend that it isn't real, because it does harm people. It is hurtful. Violence is real. Abuse is real. Injustice is real. And we don't use grace as an excuse to let these things continue and to avoid accountability. But one of the interesting things that we begin to see in the Gospel of John, and if you keep reading, and most of you know the end of the story. The end of the story is who becomes the scapegoat a little later on, several chapters later. Jesus. There's a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of political stuff going on. The Jewish council is angry. Rome just wants the Jews to be quiet. Jesus has insulted. He has insulted the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the council. They need to restore order. So what are they going to do? They're going to blame somebody. And Jesus becomes the scapegoat. Jesus becomes what he did not allow the people to do to the woman caught in adultery. And you know why he allows himself to become that scapegoat? To show once and for all that it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Blaming everyone else, blaming other people. So they made him the scapegoat. They put him on a cross. They tried to vent their frustration and their anger. And they killed him, and I'm sure they felt a little bit better after they did. Until 3 days later, right? I'm back. You know, I think that's some movie, isn't it? Isn't that like some Terminator movie? I'm back. And here's how. Here is Jesus' answer to that whole scapegoating thing. Because when he came back, he did not return evil for evil. He did not become the hatred that had killed them. Do y'all read anything about Jesus getting revenge? Did you read anything about Jesus with a Uzi going and just plowing everybody down? You don't even read that he got angry with Peter for denying him. I mean, of all things, he could have just been angry at Peter, but you don't get any of that, right? Jesus showed that scapegoating, blaming other people, it might be a temporary event like it was for the Jews, but it will not defeat evil. Evil will continue to come back. And what he teaches us is that if you don't do something with that anger and that blaming and that viciousness that we feel in our hearts that we need to get out, if we don't do something with that, it will corrupt, it will rot us from the inside. And he's showing us that we can't live that way. It will kill us. And it keeps us in this cycle. It keeps us in this cycle of, well, now it's those people. Tomorrow it'll be those people. And in our family, well, it's always the oldest one because she's the problem child, right? Family be fine as long as she doesn't come over. I mean, it's those kinds of things. And he's telling us, no, that's not how it works. We have to realize what is shaping us. And if we are holding on to blame and anger and frustration, it is shaping us into a people that Jesus said, it's going to kill you. This need that we have for other people to pay for our pain or to pay for what's wrong, to punish them for what's wrong. Now, there's a difference between punishment and accountability, right? I mean, there's accountability and justice, that's a whole different thing. I'm talking about vengeance. I'm talking about when we go after somebody because they have made us so angry. Or we've all decided, life is really hard. It's just got to be their fault. If they would just go away, our lives would be so much better. Jesus stands in the middle and says, don't do that. Don't do that. These are your brothers and sisters. I showed you why scapegoating doesn't work. I showed you what it's supposed to look like. Church, tell the world. Tell the world to stop doing that. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. What Jesus did, if we will believe him, is help us to understand that we don't defeat evil in this world by blaming other people. We defeat its power by refusing to pass it on, by refusing to pass on the blame. Okay, so I'm not going to say that this is easy for me. You know, when I get to these texts and things like this, when I start thinking of all the ways that I look at groups of people and I hear some of the things that come out of my mouth, and I'm like, oh my gosh, right? I do this too. It is so natural for us to want and to need to do this, but Jesus has shown us. Do you want the world to change? Do you want a better world? Don't jump in and pass on evil for evil. Stop blaming other people, because people won't change unless you give them some grace and give them some room to be transformed, right? And that looks different for a lot of different things, and I leave that very vague so that you can imagine, right? We defeat the power of evil by refusing to pass it on. So that's my challenge for you this week. I want you to catch yourself. I want you to catch yourself when you see it on TV or when you see it on rants and raves. Rants and raves, y'all. Whoa. I've done that a couple of times, not done it, but like read on it and been like, whoo, right? I don't put anything anywhere. But I'm thinking it in my head. I'm no better. It's in my head. I'm saying it, just not typing it. But when you see that in yourself this week, remember, if you want to see the world change, you have to change in here. Be graceful with yourself. Let Jesus transform you. And know that that's what he's telling us. That's how we're going to defeat evil in this world. Be gracious. God can do this work. Don't jump in on it. That's not what kingdom living is. That's not what Jesus taught. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.